Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Google Pixel 2 and see how the specific, device holds up in 2023. Now, the first thing I would definitely tell you is that this device probably isn't worth buying anymore, but it actually had a pretty good life. I think Google did a pretty good job during the duration of this phone, and I think that in and of itself deserves a lot of credit. Was it the most perfect phone of all time? Not really, but like I said, I think Google, they could have done a worse job. I think that's kind of the best way to put it. I think we look at the Pixel 3 XL, and I'm kind of glad they didn't make such crazy changes with their whole entire device lineup. So if you want to pick up some phones I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Google Pixel 2, on the front of this specific device, we do have that 5-inch AMOLED display. Now, I will be honest, with this phone coming out in 2017, there was a lot of competition with this device at that moment, but this was the smaller end model, not the budget tier, but it was a smaller phone during that time, especially when we had phones like the Pixel 2 XL, which were kind of, I would say, directly competing with phones like the iPhone 10 and with phones probably like the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus possibly, but more so with the Galaxy S8 that came out earlier that year. 2017 had a lot of good phones, which was a really good year for devices. So I will say on the front, you had pretty big bezels. It definitely didn't look like the latest phone, but I think, like I said, Google, they didn't do a bad job at during this time, and I did like the front-facing speaker set that we were getting on this type of device, which was actually pretty cool. So from that perspective, hopefully that kind of clears up with the way this device looked like during that time. Now, on top of that, we had the bottom USB-C port, which was great. By this point, basically every single phone had a USB-C port. There really wasn't too much competition in that standpoint, I would say. And you had a headphone jack on this phone too, which was really cool. And on the back, you had this like aluminum glass back. So it was like kind of aluminum and it was like kind of glass on the top portion. I never really understood what Google was trying to do here. I feel like they could have just went through and either put a full glass back on this phone or an aluminum back. I think in some ways like it kind of looks cool, but a majority of the time it just kind of looks off, kind of a little weird sometimes. And especially when you had phones, like I said before, like a, iPhone 10 or an iPhone 8 Plus or a Samsung Galaxy S8, those phones during that time definitely looked more premium, I would say, than this one, but I don't think it was a big deal, and I still think this phone looks pretty good overall. And on the back, you also had a camera setup on the top left, which, like I said before, I think looks good. There's not too much to complain about there. There were some things, though, that this phone didn't have that a lot of other phones during that market did have. Now, some of those things, one of those main things is basically wireless charging. There wasn't any wireless charging on this phone, which was very weird. I feel like Google was very slow to adopt a lot of things like that. So this phone kind of was a little bit of a weird situation during that device, I would say. Now, there's another thing with the camera that I'll talk about in a second, but I would say overall on the outside, I think it looks pretty good for an older type of device. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. Now moving on to another very interesting area with this phone, which is the camera setup. So with this type of device on the back, you were basically getting that single 12.2 megapixel wide angle lens, but you were also getting a 8 megapixel camera on the front. Now, I definitely do think during this moment, it wasn't a bad camera. And I do think overall, Google did a good job with this camera, during that competition. But I will say when you do have direct competition, like an iPhone 10 and or an iPhone, like a Galaxy S8, you are getting substantially better camera sets on those things than you would be getting on this type of device. But I will say, even back in 2017, the Google Pixel was kind of up there as like one of the better cameras you could actually use on your type of device. Now, the reason I say that is because of the software processing Google was basically doing on their devices during that moment. There wasn't really this humongous trend of having multiple cameras on your device, and I do think resolutions were fairly stable at 4K on the back, but it quickly became otherwise. Once phones started getting 4K at 60 and whatever, and 8K in 2020, phones that had single lenses and they didn't have that type of capability definitely looked a little bit dated. So with this type of device, you are getting that single lens, which is kind of already weird. We had the iPhone 10 that had multiple lenses, and honestly, you were getting 4K at 30 on the back, which is okay. It was good during that moment, but 1080p on the front, a lot of phones were in that same ballpark too. So there really wasn't too much to complain about in that standpoint. It really was the single camera that was kind of throwing me off. And when you had a phone like the Galaxy S8 that also had a single camera, but it had so many more features built into that camera, it kind of made you think like, is this really the best camera that you can have? Like maybe the quality might be really good, but there's not really too many more features on this phone compared to something like a Galaxy S8. So in terms of the camera, I would say that kind of covers it up in that standpoint. Now, in terms of the software and the longevity portion of these devices, The good thing is pixels last typically a very long amount of time compared to a lot of the competition. So that's always been something that's really cool with something like the Google Pixels. The Pixel 2 was no exception. Considering this was the second generation Pixel, that was a really good device in my opinion. The only problem I would say with something like the Pixel 2 was the fact that this type of device has been unsupported with software for about like 2 years, I think, or 3 years versions of software now since we have Android 14. So that's kind of a disadvantage. Like if you're planning on getting this phone, it's a bit dated now, which is kind of sad. But one thing I would probably add to that is that, you know, there's custom ROMs out there. If you really care about it, you could always custom ROM this phone and probably get some, you know, longevity out of this device too. But at that point, I probably wouldn't even go for this type of device. I'd probably just go for something like a Pixel 4 or Pixel 5 that's still supported with software. Those typically make a lot more sense to me than something like this. So from that perspective, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now on the performance side, internally on the Google Pixel 2, you had that Snapdragon 835 chipset with 4 gigabytes of RAM inside. Now the one thing with this specific phone, as I mentioned, I mean, you're not really getting that, you know, crazy performance of a chipset as of this point. But back in 2017, I mean, this was one of the faster chipsets that you could get on the, you know, Snapdragon variant. And even compared to something like this, you know, Apple A11 Bionic chip that was inside of the iPhones, this thing wasn't really that far off. So I think that's a really important thing. When you actually get a phone like this, you're really not getting that outdated version of a chipset, in my opinion, which is actually, I mean, you're getting a dated version of a chipset for sure, but it's not dated compared to the other phones in 2017. And I still talk a lot about the iPhone 10, and I still think that phone's kind of fast. And with the Pixel 2 for its age, you know, it's like 6 years old this year, I do think that's honestly very impressive that this type of device ended up, you know, still kind of feeling kind of like fast, but not fast in terms of comparing to Pixel 7. It's fast in terms of it being as old as it is. So like I feel the same way with like an iPhone 5. Like when I pick that thing up, it's fast for its age. It's just not a fast phone. I wouldn't want to use it. So if you're going to go through and you're actually planning on using this phone, the only thing you might be okay with is like maybe the like app opening speeds every once in a while, and maybe some fluidity when you're going through the home pages and whatnot. But other than that, it's going to be a pretty slowed down mess because it's not going to be that fast of a device, especially if you're trying to play heavy games like Genshin Impact or PUBG or Call of Duty Mobile. Those types of games are going to be very, very slow on this type of device. So it makes little to no sense to even buy a phone like this from that perspective alone. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. Battery life was also not bad, 2700 milliamp, which was not bad during that time. So I think that's honestly not that big of a deal either. And I think that's actually honestly kind of a cool thing. So to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I'd probably tell you is the Google Pixel 2, I think, sits in a very, very interesting spot. It's not worth buying anymore because it's old, but if you're willing to custom ROM it, maybe it's worth it to some of you. But I do think for a majority of people watching this, you are better off getting a phone that is still supported with software. And I've said this for a long amount of time. If you've heard this before, please stop me. But with a phone that is still supported, you don't have to worry about custom ROMs, and it's still probably a fairly fast and reliable phone. I would hate for you to go and buy a phone and you already feel like it's an outdated device. I hate being in that position, and I wouldn't want you to be in that position either. So at the bare minimum, if you want to buy something like a Pixel 4a, that is going to be a better phone than this thing in my opinion. If you want to go and buy something like a Google Pixel 4 even, that would probably be better than this thing. But the best bet is going up to something that's still supported. So a Pixel 4a 5G would be good. A Pixel 5 would still be good. Pixel 5a would be really good. And you know, if you want to go for the iPhones, you can always go for the iPhones, but that's kind of how I look at this specific device as of right now. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.